To learn more about the real-life St. Patrick, we turn to Philip Freeman. He's a professor at Pepperdine University and the author of St. Patrick of Ireland, a biography. Our first question is simply, what should people know about St. Patrick?
St. Patrick was a fascinating man, and there's a lot of things that people think they know about him that really aren't true. There's a lot of myths that have grown up around him, the snakes and the shamrocks and all of that. But he was a very real man who lived in Britain at the end of the Roman Empire, and he was kidnapped as a teenager and taken to Ireland as a slave, where he served for 7 years. And then he escaped in a rather amazing adventure story, came back to Britain, but then felt called to return to Ireland as a missionary for the rest of his life. And he worked there and he did some amazing things, and he had a very difficult time. And he writes about it in two remarkable letters that have survived that he wrote himself.
So that makes us want to know, what's the nature of those letters?
The letters are both defensive in many ways. At the end of his career, while he's an old man, some British warlords send raiders over and they capture some of his converts and they sell them back into slavery in Britain. And Patrick writes them, these warlords, and they say, these people are Christians. You cannot do this to your brothers and sisters. That's his first letter. And then he writes a defense called the Confession or Confessio, where he writes to the bishops of Britain who have called him back basically to stand trial because they don't like the way he's doing things in Ireland. And Patrick says, no, I won't go. And in that story, he gives, in that letter, he gives his life story. And he talks about all of the works and all of the problems and all of the sufferings that he has undergone.
So how would you summarize his faith journey through all of this, and how did his faith guide him?
Well, Patrick was raised in a Christian family. His father was a deacon, his grandfather was a priest. But as Patrick himself says, later in childhood and certainly as a teenager, he became an atheist. He wanted nothing to do with the church. He didn't believe any of it anymore. And then when he was kidnapped and taken to Ireland, those years where he had nobody to turn to, he returned to his childhood faith. And he says he began to pray day and night until finally he was rescued. So Patrick's faith journey was one from disbelief to belief, and his relationship with God was, I think, a quite intimate one. It was a struggle in many ways. Patrick struggled. He talks about his difficulties with depression and all of the difficulties that he faced in his missionary work in Ireland. But he never lost faith. He was an Orthodox Catholic. He was a great and faithful believer.
So how would you describe St. Patrick's lasting legacy?
Well, Patrick's legacy is, there are different legacies. There, of course, is St. Patrick's Day. There is the parties and the parades in Chicago and Boston and all of that. And all of that is fine. It's a celebration of Irish culture, which is great. But Patrick, I think, would have been very surprised at all of the hoopla that has grown up around him, because it really has nothing to do with him. Patrick he wasn't even Irish. He was from Britain, and he came to Ireland, and he spent the rest of his life there. But he is the real legacy of Patrick is one of faith and struggle and overcoming and continuing to spread Christianity and to help to work to help other people.
What about the folklore about the snakes? We hear so much about that.
Well, one thing about Patrick, everybody knows that he was the man who supposedly drove snakes out of Ireland, but actually there were never any snakes in Ireland. Ireland was snake-free. And so the stories that grew up about Patrick and the snakes, those came along centuries later. And really, snakes, ever since the Garden of Eden, have been a symbol of evil. So the snake story is really Patrick driving the evil out of Ireland, the old pagan ways. But even though there were no snakes, the works that Patrick did, not miraculous, but quite wonderful.
Indeed, and so interesting, too. Our thanks to Philip Freeman for that biography of St. Patrick. He earlier told us that he is inspired by the saint because St. Patrick faced and overcame hard times, and so can we.